Hello, everybody. Welcome into our Kroger Kickoff. My name is Brandon Adams. We're standing here live next to Bobby Dodd Stadium. Got a whole bunch of Georgia fans gathered around us right here at the corner of North Avenue and whatever street this is, as the Georgia Bulldogs are going to arrive here for the dog walk in just a couple of minutes for a noon kickoff against Georgia Tech today. And I got to tell you, Saturday after Thanksgiving in short sleeves, not such a bad deal. High expected to be around 70 degrees today. For the most part, I think the thought is rain will be avoided. We should have very pleasant weather for the renewal of the rivalry known as clean, old-fashioned hate. And for the next few minutes before the Georgia players arrive and the Georgia coach as well, we'll have a chance to kind of talk to you about everything that's going to go on here today. I'm going to also see if I can corral Jeff Sintel here coming up in just a minute. We'll get some thoughts from Jeff on both the game and a little bit of a reaction to the recruiting news. If you follow UGA recruiting, you may have seen last night that four-star defensive lineman Zykevius Walker surprised many when he chose Auburn over Georgia. We'll get some thoughts from Jeff Sintel on that. But, of course, the mood today is mostly a happy one as the Dawgs get ready to take on the Yellow Jackets. And a little bit of a different look from Georgia as it plays here at Grant Field today. My understanding is the Dawgs will be in white jerseys today. Tech kind of released its color combo, and I believe they're going to be wearing their gold. They don't wear gold tops a lot, but I guess they're going to wear these gold tops today. And with that, Georgia will not be in its customary red. It's worn red every year in Atlanta as far back as I can remember. Today they will be wearing their traditional road uniforms, white with the silver breeches. So a little bit of a different look for the Dawgs here at Bobby Dodd Stadium, but UGA fans, of course, hoping for that same result. Georgia has won every meeting played here in downtown Atlanta between the Dawgs and the Jackets, dating back to the last loss in 1999, controversial fashion, as many of you will remember that day with the, I'll use air quotes for this, Jasper Sanks fumble. It's been all Dawgs, though, here in Atlanta since then, winning every single one, starting with Mark Richt's first game against the Yellow Jackets back in 2001, and obviously running through the entire string up until that point in time. Georgia also looking to do something against the Jackets that it's done back in 2002, 2003, 2005, 2011, 2012, the last couple of years as well, which is get a win against Georgia Tech and handle their business, despite the fact there is the temptation to look ahead to next Saturday's SEC championship game. For the most part, Georgia has been fine in these moments when it's got the SEC championship on its mind, still playing Georgia Tech, and under Kirby Smart, that's been especially true. The Dawgs seemingly quite focused on games like this, and as former UGA All-American John Stinchcomb explained this week on Dog Nation Daily, John, of course, has some experience with this playing in the 2002 game as the SEC East champion in a game the Dawgs won 51-7 back in Athens. What John told us is that the energy of the rivalry, the fact that you don't want to hear Tech fans chirping, you don't want to give them any reason to boast and brag about anything, he says that provides kind of its own degree of momentum in a game like this. And he believes that you don't have to worry too much about the Georgia fans being ready to go here for today. It's our Kroger Kickoff. I'm going to see if I can drag Jeff Sintel over here, and we'll see if we can get Jeff to talk to us a little bit. And as I try to catch up with Jeff Sintel, I'll also remind you that if you go to DogNation.com right now, you can find out more about a very special thing that Kroger is doing here this holiday season. It's a tradition the last couple of years. The legendary former coach and athletic director Vince Dooley, who does a lot of book signings at various Krogers. He was in Gainesville already this week. There's a whole list of events he's got coming up, and you can find out more about that at DogNation.com. Right there at the top of the page, you can see more about the Coach Dooley book signing tour at various Krogers. That's a great holiday gift, or if you just want your own opportunity to meet one of the true legends of Georgia football, Coach Dooley at Krogers all throughout the Atlanta area and throughout the North Georgia area. A great chance to do that, so check out DogNation.com for more details on that. Before the dog walk happens, let me bring in Dog Nation's recruiting insider Jeff Sintel, also just sort of a photographer extraordinaire here today. And Jeff, I know you've been at a lot of these renewals of clean, old-fashioned hate over the years. And I'm curious to find out what you expect to happen here in this one today. Georgia is a more than a 4-touchdown favorite. SEC championship next week. What's both the recipe for victory and, I guess, the checklist of things you'd like to see today?
Yeah, I think most Georgia fans about this one just want to see a robust offensive performance, a lot of confidence, a lot of big shots. I bet if you ask most Georgia fans, most of our viewers at home or on their smartphones, if you had to say, would you rather Georgia score 55 or 60 or give up 14 to 17, I think more people would rather, hold them to 14 or 17. I think most people would take 55 points or so, 50 points on the scoreboard, even if it meant giving up 14 to 17 points. You know, my feelings, Brandon, I'm changing as I get a little bit older. I just think this game maybe belongs at the beginning of the season. I think it belongs in warm weather. If Georgia can get the Auburn game by some finagling in October, then I think Georgia and Georgia Tech should maybe every once in a while think about playing that game at the Kickoff Classic at the Chick-fil-A event. in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I know Tech would make a lot more money. I know there'd be a lot more fanfare. I remember driving through here on Tuesday, Brandon, when we were on the way to the airport for Thanksgiving travels, and there were still tickets available on the marquee here at Bobby Dodd Stadium. When you have tickets available on a Tuesday prior to a game Saturday, that to me just doesn't feel like a rivalry anymore.
Well, I definitely think, and we talked about this on Dog Nation Daily a bit this week, that in the absence of Paul Johnson coaching this game for Georgia Tech, the rivalry, at least for now, has lost its identity. For a number of years, dating back to Johnson's first game in the series in 2008, this was the talent advantage of Georgia against the scheme of Paul Johnson and his attempt to design a series of play calls that kind of kept the Georgia talent off balance. And for the most part, that narrative had been trampled the last couple of years because the Georgia defense had been so good against the triple option offense, but it was at least a storyline. And really, in the games which Johnson coached, I don't know that any figure in the game, player or coach, was talked about more than Johnson for the good and for the bad. And now that he's not here, Jeff Collins just hasn't put his stamp on the program as of yet. He doesn't have the kind of talent he needs to run the system he wants to run. I think that's still going to be a very hard proposition for Tech to ever get that kind of talent, and not because of Georgia, but because of Tennessee and Clemson and South Carolina and all those programs from surrounding states that want to recruit the Atlanta area. So I think there's a real difficult challenge and a task ahead of Jeff Collins. Can he put any kind of stamp on this rivalry whatsoever? Because I always believe that when it comes to the juice of a rivalry, the feeling of a rivalry, it's the underdog's responsibility, the lesser program's responsibility to push the issue. That means in the Iron Bowl, the responsibility falls on Auburn. In clean old-fashioned hay, the responsibility falls on Georgia Tech. In Michigan and Ohio State right now, just given the recent track record in that, even though Michigan's a historic program, the Wolverines have the responsibility of kind of setting the tone. Florida State, because the Seminoles are without a coach, it's their responsibility to restore that rivalry. And if Georgia Tech's going to mean anything, and Georgia fans hope it doesn't, they'll take the easy win and move on. But if this rivalry is ever going to mean anything again, I think the responsibility rests with Georgia Tech to kind of do something to make Georgia fans care about it.
Well, I think maybe the bad juju about this matchup is lessened now with no more triple option offense, no more cut blocking, no more of that scheme that Georgia only sees once a year and has to take up practice time. I think it's different. Jeff Collins is now going after some of the same players in the state of Georgia that Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs are. I think you see Georgia Tech basically, and Kirby Smart even confirmed it this week, they basically run a lot of the same defensive styles now, same defensive pressures, same multiple fronts. I think what it's going to take is it's going to take Georgia Tech putting together a top 20 recruiting class every once in a while, because folks got to remember there's a good chance where Tech annually can recruit better than a Kentucky, for example, a Vanderbilt, for example. Yeah. They can recruit better than an Arkansas or an Ole Miss or Mississippi State, some of those conference games that Georgia plays on the schedule. So when the Jackets do that and they start bringing in guys that are just more elite prospects, I mean, one of the things that always boggles my mind is I've been doing this a long time. I very rarely see a Georgia Tech commitment at an opening, a Georgia Tech commitment at an Under Armour All-American game or All-American Bowl game. And until that happens,
more likely to see them in a spelling bee, probably.
What about something with a slide rule and protractor Olympics or something like that? Let's check them all right there. But, I mean, they're just not going after the same players yet. And what you see Tech getting more elite players, and not just the every once in a while Charles Johnson, I think this rivalry will mean more.
Well, speaking of getting players, obviously it's a happy and joyous day here in downtown Atlanta for the renewal of clean old-fashioned hay. But Georgia did get a little bit of bad news last night when Zykevius Walker, the defensive lineman from Sly County, chose Auburn over UGA. I want to make sure I get a comment from you on this. And let me kind of set this up this way and speak on behalf of the fans here for a moment. I think the first cousin to frustration sometimes is confusion. And I think there is a little bit of frustration and confusion about the fact that we have gone now months and months and months without hearing any recruiting news whatsoever. And then the last two recruiting stories we've heard have been bad news. Noah Sewell choosing Oregon over Georgia. That's obviously understandable. His brother plays there. The Walker thing, I think, was a lot more surprising to a lot more people because it's just been treated as a given that Zykevius Walker was going to be at Georgia, and it was simply a matter of scheduling when that announcement was going to be made. So for the Georgia fan who kind of wonders about the current state of the 2020 recruiting class, given the fact that there's a lot of elite prospects in the class right now as commits, but maybe a little bit of lost momentum here towards the end of the cycle, what would you say to those Georgia fans right now?
Well, first of all, we gotta make this not just a main dish Thanksgiving dialogue here, but also think about the side dishes. First of all, 2021 recruiting news has happened, but I get the point. The 2020 recruiting cycle, it's been 106 days since Georgia got a commitment for 2020, and I know a lot of folks are wondering, what's happening. It looks like now, Brandon, Georgia's only going to take 4 guys in the class of 2020 from the state of Georgia. That's only two of the top 25 players in the state of Georgia. That's Broderick Jones and that's Tate Ratledge. I just think with the Zacchaeus Walker thing, the most interesting thing to me is I don't even think Georgia was second. I think that was probably even a Florida in that. And to me, that's just the way I looked at Zacchaeus Walker and his recruiting is I thought he was going to be a Bulldog by April, by May. And the longer it drew out, the longer I thought other schools really had a shot. And everybody, you just can't think that way when Georgia doesn't get a Noah Sewell. That doesn't create momentum for a player like Zacchaeus Walker to become a shoe-in on the board, because that doesn't really matter, because these recruits want to feel that sustained interest as a priority for the longest time from a lot of these schools.
So we'll obviously follow that story and see where it goes from here, how Georgia fills the spot, presumably that would have gone to Zacchaeus Walker. Obviously, Jordan Birch looms, the big-time potential defensive lineman get, and we'll kind of see where it happens after that. But for now, we'll turn our attention back to Georgia versus Georgia Tech on the field. And, I think my overall feeling about this game today may be a little bit different than many of the fans who've gathered around here to see the dog walk, which we get going here in just a moment. Really, the only thing I care about is Georgia finding a way to get a win, but I don't need all that beautiful of a win. I just need to see Georgia get a win, remain healthy, and get ready for the other game in downtown Atlanta, right down the road from here, down Centennial Olympic Park Drive next Saturday in a healthy fashion. Obviously, the Lawrence Cager news kind of hangs over all of this. You hope that's the last big intro we have to talk about ahead of that Georgia LSU game next weekend. But for me, that's what this is really about, because I think that Tech right now, just given the disarray this roster finds itself in, I'm not quite so sure there's anything that Georgia could show against Georgia Tech today that would make me feel, this sets up Georgia well for next Saturday against LSU. This is the perfect final tune-up. I think the time for all that's just simply over and done. The schedule dictates this game must be played, so therefore win it and get ready for the one next Saturday. That's really about the only thing I need to see today is a healthy Georgia team walking out of here.
Well, I know most people, and you probably are in the crowd that 30-0 shutout, nobody hurt. That's ideal, correct? I just see this is a game where a supporting character can loom large. Maybe a huge game for Akirus Jackson. Maybe a huge game for, I don't know, Zamir White, somebody like that, where somebody just makes a lot of plays and a lot of the key components of the game plan for LSU in the coming days don't have to really stay out of the bubble wrap a little bit. You'd like to see DeAndre Swift only get in and out with about 7 or 8 touches, and you would see other guys. I'd love to see Brian Harrion have a 150-yard game and like 3 touchdowns today as well.
Yeah, I will remind myself of this, though. Saw a really great quote from Jim Tressel, the old Ohio State coach, who I guess made a media appearance this week, and he was asked about, the Michigan game when you have Big Ten titles and, national championships on the line. And he said something really interesting. I think it's also appropriate for Georgia here against Georgia Tech as well. He said, if you look at every Big Ten championship ring we ever had, every national championship ring we ever had, they all had the score of the Michigan-Ohio State game on them. In other words, saying that even in a year when you're hoisting trophies and winning championships, beating your main end-of-the-season rival for a school like Ohio State still really matters. And while I say that for Georgia it's a win and stay healthy mentality today, that's not meant to obscure the overall history of this, which is obviously really important to those fans old enough to remember back when a win against Georgia Tech was far from a given, or some of the players on this roster who actually can think back to 2016 when Georgia got upset by Tech there in Athens. They obviously have a bad taste in their mouth on that, and the only way to remove that is to win 3 straight on their way out the door. So obviously, while admittedly my interest is far more in the SEC championship game than it is Georgia Tech, there are a lot of people that this game still really matters to. Georgia history is written in part by how well you do against Georgia Tech, and from that standpoint, there is a degree of history on the line today for Georgia, even if the championships will be decided starting next Saturday.
Yeah, and that's a lot of things. Folks really don't understand really how this rivalry used to be. It's been so long since Tech was able to put together 2 or 3 straight wins against Georgia. You got to go back a long way until, I don't know, Brandon, when would you say this was a healthy competitive rivalry? 10 years ago, probably?
Maybe so.
Some of
the
those,
50s?
Some of those years where, O'Leary had it rolling and Gailey had it rolling, some of those games, just totally different. Remember the feeling everybody was going in there? Somehow Tech was at a level where that SEC, ACC stuff really didn't matter as much. And now you've got Georgia Tech, I think they have a 24, 25 overall recruiting class. That's major for this program. And Jeff Collins, I mean, he's been at Florida. He's been at Alabama at the time. He really knows how to recruit. Got a lot of big-time recruiters, at least guys that know how to recruit on the staff. You just wonder what makes this rivalry better when maybe a lot of those players, to mesh the Zacchaeus Walker story here with the Georgia Tech game, maybe a lot of those players, when Georgia's only taking 2 or 3 guys every year or 2 or 3 elite guys every year from the state of Georgia, maybe more of those guys become Yellow Jackets instead of Gators or Gamecocks or Auburn Tigers or Tennessee Volunteers. And then this game really becomes more of that state blood boiling type thing.
All right, Jeff, we're going to let you go get set up. I know you want to take some pictures. Thanks for being here, part of our Kroger Kickoff. We'll also see Jeff here later on this evening as part of the Pella Window postgame show after the game here, and we hopefully get a chance to talk about a Georgia win against the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. If you're just joining us, this is our Kroger Kickoff. We're standing here live next to Bobby Dodd Stadium. We are very close to the start of the dog walk. We'll be able to show you that when it happens. The players and coaches will walk right behind me into the stadium, so I'll step out of the way and give you a great chance to see them here coming up. Something else you're going to want to see coming up as well is, once again, with our friends at Kroger next week. Great events going on Thursday and Friday with the terrific former Georgia wide receiver Muhammad Massaquoi. And by the way, great time to be talking about Massaquoi, given the fact that he was a part of one of the great recent memories for Georgia versus Georgia Tech, the touchdown to win the game for the Dawgs back in 2006, one of the great calls by Larry Munson, kind of the later era Munson calls. The Massaquoi catch to end that game was terrific in 2006, and you can certainly go talk to him about that when Muhammad Massaquoi makes appearances at a couple Krogers coming up here over the course of the next couple of days. This Thursday from 5 to 6 p.m., Mo Mass going to be at the Kroger on Highway 96 in Bon Air, Georgia. If you're watching on video, you can see the address there on your screen, but the Kroger in Bon Air on Highway 96, that's this Thursday from 5 to 6. And the following day on Friday at the Kroger on Highway 29 North in Athens, also from 5 to 6. So Muhammad Massaquoi, terrific former Georgia Bulldog, unbelievable story of overcoming adversity and a tremendous degree of perseverance. One of the real great former Dogs, DGD in every sense of the word. And he's going to be this Thursday and Friday at the Kroger in Bon Air on Thursday, Kroger in Athens on Friday. Take a look at those addresses and make plans to go by and see him from 5 to 6 p.m. there. Another way that Kroger's making the lead up to the SEC Championship game a whole lot of fun, and the start to your holiday season really fun there as well. We will get the dog walk here in just a moment. A lot of fans have gathered for that. I'm going to see if I can get the comments up and running here. Had a little bit of an issue with the phone, so let's see if I can get these pulled up, and we'll see if we can kind of get some of these rolling while we wait on the start of that. Connor, can you help me just with any kind of comment section for right now? I've got an issue with my phone. Either one I will take, and we'll let you talk for a little bit. And if you want to weigh in on what Jeff was saying about the game here today, or if you want to talk about the Zacchaeus Walker thing for a little bit, we can obviously do that. Obviously, there's expectation for good news from Georgia before the 2020 class comes to a close, but admittedly, a little bit of disappointment about what went down with Walker last night. Over here for a moment on Facebook, Nick Lurch says, what's the score today? He says, how about 52-7, a call back to 2002? That'd certainly be a good one, Nick. I appreciate that. Jenny Baldowski checking in with the Go Dogs. Appreciate that. Jacob O'Neill calling it 42-10. That'd be a good thing to see there as well. Chris McGuire checking in with a Go Dogs there as well. Matt Turner says, I'm looking bald on top. Yeah, so, Matt, here's the honest truth. I'm pretty tall, so normally I can kind of stand tall enough that you can't see. But if you ever, see me lean down or look down or something like that, I kind of give that away there at that point in time. And, yeah, unfortunately, I'm like Lake Lanier in the winter on top, unfortunately. So let's get a few more here of your comments. Yo Soy says, I'm everything Georgia. So good to have you with us today, Yo. Appreciate you being a part of the comment section. Jordan Daniel says, Jake Fromm stay or go. Obviously, that's a decision we'll be awaiting news for on Fromm by the end of the year. But while we're unsure about Fromm's future, we do know this. For a whole number of Georgia guys, this will be their last game against Georgia Tech. Seniors who are part of that loss to the Jackets 2016, they want to end here on a high note. There are some juniors who will almost certainly be going to the NFL draft. Andrew Thomas is one of the names that prominently comes to mind there, where you think this is probably their last chance to get a big win against the in-state rival. And for guys like Thomas who played their high school football here in the city of Atlanta, the assumption you would make is that this game means even more to them. It's one of those things that Kirby Smart talks a lot about. Georgia has a lot of rivals. Georgia, just geographically speaking, is a big state. That means people in North Georgia think a lot about Tennessee. People down in Southwest Georgia think a lot about Florida, or I should say Southeast Georgia, think a lot about Florida. Over on the west side, maybe it's Auburn. And here in the Atlanta area, for a lot of folks, they are a lot closer to Georgia Tech, and therefore the game seemingly means a lot more to them. just a different situation geographically for Georgia than it is for a lot of college football programs. And no doubt for a lot of these guys, Tech is the game they have circled. A few more of your comments coming up here. Jeffrey Melton calling for a shutout. He's got Georgia 28-0 here today. Obviously seeing this defense play that well again would certainly be a great way to cap off the regular season. Georgia, which has been so stingy for the entirety of the year, adding another shutout to its resume here today would be pretty impressive indeed. David Reiford, Bobby Brown both checking in with the Go Dogs. Christopher Wilson checking in from New York City with the Go Dogs. Appreciate that. Justin Canada says, Go Dogs, we need some wide receivers to get some reps in. And obviously what Justin's referencing is something we talked about a lot on Dog Nation Daily yesterday, and Georgia fans all over the place have been talking about now for quite some time, which is the report you've read at DogNation.com that Lawrence Cager is not going to play in the game today, not going to play in the SEC Championship, could very well have his season done. We may not see Cager again in a UGA uniform because of an ankle injury that he suffered on Wednesday. So finding more chemistry between Jake Fromm and the receivers that'll be asked to now step up more fully in the absence of Cager, that is an important storyline here for this game here today. Dennis Conley calls for a 38-10 final, looking for 5 UGA sacks. That's quite a prediction from Dennis. Appreciate that. Jess Watson says, how do y'all see the dog walk without going to the game? So, Jess, I guess you can stop by Athens or wherever the dog walk's taking place. This has actually taken place outside the ticketed area. So most of the people who are standing here right now do have tickets. They will be going to the game. But technically the dog walk is not a ticketed event. It's a public event. And so for really any game in Athens or, certainly more likely Athens than other places, there'll be folks who show up to be a part of the scene but don't actually buy a ticket and go into the game. And certainly you'd be free to do that if that's something you wanted to do. Thomas Bates says, big game for Swift and all the backs. I'm hoping we see some more screens and checkdowns. Yeah, I think that that certainly checkdown throws, easy throws to kind of bolster the completion percentage of Fromm and maybe possibly bolstering his confidence as well. I do think that's an important part of the Georgia game plan, and I do think that Tech, just given the fact that it's not been strong this year necessarily when stopping the run, this may be a little bit more to the return to form that we saw in the early season games against teams like Vanderbilt and Arkansas State. Really, statistically speaking, those defenses compare a lot more, at least when it comes to the ground game, compare a lot more with Georgia Tech than maybe what the Dogs have been playing most of as of late. So we could see a big day for a lot of Georgia running backs. That's probably true. Winston Mock asks a question that I will admit has definitely been on my mind. He says, how is it possible that this is the last regular season game? And it really is amazing. And, every year I try to remind myself that the season always goes by so much faster than you think it's going to. Now, the wait for the dog walk never goes by fast. That's always really, really slow. But the season itself just has a way of just kind of going by really, really quick. And this is another example of that. As I get older, it seems like they go by quicker and quicker and quicker. This is certainly an example of that. So I hope you've all found your own way to enjoy it, appreciate it, with other Georgia fans that you watch games with, either in the living room or in the stadium with or tailgate with, whatever your process is. I think the challenge for all of us is to make sure we soak up every moment, the good and the bad, and realize that we're really lucky to be able to follow a team like Georgia who's performing as well as it is. But it is amazing how fast it all goes by. And I hear some sirens blaring. I don't know if that means that we're getting close to the dog walk, but certainly one can only hope. Rhodey Williams talking about potential transfers. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting offseason when you start thinking about stuff like that. We'll see how it goes. Matthew Fulson checking in from Kansas City. Matthew, enjoy some of that good Kansas City barbecue for us and have a good time here today watching the game. Terry Rigdon says, on the subject of recruiting, obviously wanting to see Georgia put a fence around the state, and Georgia will begin trying to do just that. For now, though, it's the fence here around Bobby Dodd Stadium that might become into play here. Sirens are loud. They are getting closer. That might mean that the Georgia players themselves are also getting closer today there as well. Tracy Parker says, them Dogs got this game. Lisa Brasher says, go Dogs, let's wreck Tech. Wyatt Fielding calling for big days from Swift and Andrew Thomas. Patricia Scrogsum checking in to say, go Dogs. Clay Dyke says, where is everyone? We got a lot of Georgia fans over here to my left. A lot of folks tuning in to watch on video. And hopefully in a moment we'll have some Georgia coaches and players here showing up as well. While we're getting ready for them, I'll also remind you that as you're getting ready for holiday parties here, or maybe it's a game-watching party here today, Kroger's got you taken care of when it comes to party platters. You can get shrimp platters, meat and cheese trays, veggie trays, and they all start at just $19.99. So it's an amazing deal to gather together with friends over some good food. That's what Kroger's famous for. It's fresh for everyone, and it can be fresh for you as well when you use their party platters to get together and have a great time here. So stop by and speak to someone at the Kroger Deli near you. They can take good care of you when it comes to something like that. Lottie Lauderdale says, let's get up by 21 points early so we can pull the starters, and that would certainly be a nice thing to be able to see. Chad Buchanan says, I want to see work in the passing game. Not worry about how big the score is, just get better. And I think that's a pretty good idea for how Georgia might approach this today, looking for its chances to improve. And the good news is Kirby Smart says that's really the task for Georgia each and every day. You know, I know that some of this stuff can kind of grow to sound a lot like cliches, you know, the idea of tack the day and everything else that Georgia talks about a lot. But honestly, that's not, you know, maybe as cliche as you might think. Georgia's obviously looking to use every moment it can to get better and improve. That'll certainly be the case here today. I continue to hear sirens coming. Do we have a sense this might be the Georgia team? All right, so Georgia State Patrol is pulling up. That means the Georgia buses can't be all that far behind. So we're going to step away here and give you a chance to get ready for that. We appreciate you being a part of our Kroger Kickoff. We'll allow you to get a little closer and be able to see this for yourself here. See a long list of state troopers, a series of buses kind of rolling in. Typically for away games, the scene has basically been cheers from the fans, but not quite as many handshakes, high fives, and hugs as you get from the home games. For those particular games in Athens, there's typically a lot of smiles and there's a good degree of pageantry associated with the dog walk. Today, like any other road game, games played away from Athens, my guess is you'll see, for the most part, stone-faced dogs, focused on the task at hand, the customary language of this being a business trip. My guess is that's exactly how Georgia will approach this, and you'll see them dressed very much that same way. Peering into the window of the first bus to pull up, you see Kirby Smart sitting in the very first seat. So he's likely to be the first guy we see getting off the bus right there in front of you in just a moment. Security gathered around here. An entire flood of Georgia fans have taken over this corner of North Avenue. You see Smart getting out of the bus, stopping to say hello to a lot of security, many of which here even at Bobby Dodd Stadium, possibly Georgia fans, get excited about getting their chance to say hello to Smart. Just after him, here comes Georgia quarterback Jake Fromm, defensive coordinator Dan Lanning. So Smart is going to stop by and at least say hello to one or two people here. Some of the security maybe. Fromm, Cleveland walking by, offensive coordinator Dan Lanning, Charlie Warner, Cade Mays, DeAndre Swift. Very nice shot. Thomas for clean old-fashioned hay. Brian Harrion, Del McGee, Trey Hill, Isaiah Wilson. There's Glenn Schumann, the Georgia linebackers coach. As the Dawgs continue to file in, Tyler Simmons, a senior playing his last game here at Georgia versus Georgia Tech. He's obviously excited about that. You see Eric Stokes walking by. Stokes, of course, making news because of an injury situation he dealt with at the Texas A&M game. Aziz Ojolari coming by, Georgia offensive line coach Sam Pittman, Tyson Campbell, the Georgia cornerback. As predicted, pretty serious-looking bunch of Dogs right now as Nolan Smith, J.R. Reed make their way through. Georgia receiver George Pickens, sharp with the red sneakers on. He's coming on by. Rodrigo Blankenship, also one of these Georgia seniors, will do it for the last time today against Georgia Tech. There's Dominic Blaylock, who's really emerged in a nice way here towards the end of the season. John Fitzpatrick, the Georgia tight end, another one of these guys who played his high school football in the Atlanta area. You know this game means a lot to him. Demetrius Robertson making his way through. Nakobe Dean, always looking sharp, man. Nakobe is always well-dressed. He's stepping over to say hello to some family and friends. Malik Herring doing very much the same thing. Mikhail Carter coming by, Stetson Bennett. Julian Rochester. Obviously, we're curious to see what Rochester's future holds. The possibility this is not his last game against Georgia Tech. Trayvon Walker, once again, another one of these guys typically using the dog walk as a chance to be dressed quite sharp. Zamir White, Adam Anderson coming through. A lot of Georgia family members getting close to the railing here. They get a chance to say hello to a lot of folks. Georgia student assistant Jarvis Jones, of course, the great former player. He's also coming through. You see Dean and Anderson come back across your screen there one more time. It's a tight squeeze here next to Bobby Dodd Stadium in downtown Atlanta. So the Georgia players a little slower getting in than you typically might think. Xavier Truss coming by. Collection of Georgia staffers here making their way through as well. Georgia getting ready for Georgia Tech at noon today at Bobby Dodd Stadium. Of course, we'll, after the game, get a chance to hear from Georgia players and Coach Kirby Smart, and then be with you for the Pella Window post-game show to wrap up the regular season. As Georgia Athletic Director Greg McGarity, President Dr. Jerry Moorhead, they're stepping on through here. Dog Walk continues the part of our Kroger Kickoff. We appreciate you being a part of it, not just today, but throughout the season here on all the Dog Nation video channels. I'll invite you to check in at the forum throughout the day at forum.dognation.com, and, of course, plenty of coverage at dognation.com there as well. So the Dog Walk has final season. Georgia with its mind set on its in-state rival, Georgia Tech. A chance to win once again in the series known as Clean Old-Fashioned Hate and set the stage to be back here in downtown Atlanta next Saturday for the SEC Championship game. Thanks for being with us here today on the Kroger Kickoff. We'll look forward to seeing you for our Pella Window postgame show after the game. Enjoy the game, everybody.